Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's story I'm going to teach us how to make this gown. So I marked my shoulder line, my bust line, my under bust line, and my half length plus half inch for my seam allowance. So I went over to my shoulder and I marked 4 inch for my neck and 7.5 for my shoulder. I came down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope. So the next thing I did was to come down by 7.5, that is my shoulder. I replaced it downwards as you can see me doing. So I got my armhole, which is 7.6. I went ahead and marked 7.6 as you can see, and then I used my rule to connect a straight line all the way down, and then I extended my line, that is my chest line. So the next thing I'm going to mark is my nipple to nipple measurement. My nipple to nipple is 3.5, but I went ahead and added 4 inch for my seam allowance. So after then I use my rule to connect a straight line all the way down to my waistline. So the next thing I did was to come up by half inch, and then from that bust point I came down by 1 inch to avoid that pointy part on the breast part. So now I went to the waistline, marked half inch as you can see, and then I'm going to connect it to that my under bust half inch. So I went ahead and connected it like so. So the next thing I'm going to do is to mark 1 inch from that point. As you can see, I also did the same thing at the waistline. So now I'm going to connect it to that 1 inch below my bust, as you can see me do. You can as well use your armhole curve or your freehand sketch if you're good at that. So the next thing I'm going to do is to mark my body measurement. That's my bust divided by 4. I got 9.25. I extended it to my chest line. Then I went to my waistline. I marked my waist, which is divided by 4 as well. I got 8. So I'm going to replace that 1.5 at that part, that intake. So I replaced it like so. So now the next thing I am going to do is to go up to that my under bust and mark the same thing I did on my waist like so, as you can see. So the next thing we're going to do is to add 2 inch or 2.5 depending on what you want. So but I added 2.5 to mine. So the next thing we're going to do is to get the midpoint of our armhole depth. I got my midpoint like so. I marked that my midpoint. So I am going to come in by 0.5 or half an inch like so. So I am going to connect it from the point, from that point, and then that point. It's, you can use your freehand sketch or you can use your curve rule, but I use my freehand sketch at this point. So now the next thing we're going to do is to connect from that part all the way to the half inch above our bust point. So the next thing I did was to blend it like so, because that part is not supposed to be pointy, so I blended it. So the next thing to do is to come to that point. We're going to mark half inch on the both side, as you can see me doing. That is half inch, making it 1 inch. So the next thing we're going to do is to connect it all the way down like so. So at that point you're going to come up by 1 inch, because if you didn't do so, it is going to be shortened when you are making your dress. So I went up by 1 inch. As I replace that 1 inch, I'm going to cut off there. So I went to the armhole side and I marked 1 inch as well, because I am going to connect it. So I blended it towards that 1 inch. So the next thing I did was to go to my neckline. Although I am still going to cut my asymmetric neckline, but I went ahead and marked 1 inch like so, and I blended it towards my neckline. So under my shoulder, I am going to come up by 1/2 inch. The 1/2 inch I'm going to come up will be for my allowance. So guys, at this point we are almost on, or probably done, with our front side. So now we move over to the back part. I left about 1.5 inch for my zipper allowance, so I marked my neck, my shoulder, that is 7.5. So I came down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope, and then I am going to connect it like so. So the next thing I did was to come down to 7.6 for my armhole depth. So at that point I went ahead and extended the line that is also called my chest line. So the next thing we are going to do is to input our dart intake. So I am going to do the same thing I did at the front, that is my 4 inches. I did the same thing on the bust, on the bust and the waistline. So I went ahead and connected it like so. So I also went for my dart intake, that is 1/2 inch on the both side. So now I went over to my armhole depth. I got my midpoint of my armhole depth. I marked it like so. So now I will go over to input my body measurement, as you can see me doing. I replaced that my 1 inch for my dart intake as well. So now the next thing to do is to connect our points, as you can see me doing. That is for my armhole, you can see me doing. So I went ahead and added 2.5 for my allowances. So now at this point I am going to connect it all the way to my midpoint, as you can see me doing. So the next thing I did was to come up by 1 inch at that side. I did the same thing at that my armhole, because if you don't do so, it's going to shorten when you're making your back piece. So I went ahead and blended it. So at this point I went over to my zipper part. I came in by 1 inch to avoid that bulgy part at the back, to allow our zip to sit well at the back. So I went ahead and blended it all the way up. So now that we are done, I went over to my neck and marked down 1 inch for my neck depth. Although I'm still going to mark my asymmetric neck, I went to my shoulder, added 1/2 inch for my seam allowance. Please guys, if you have watched to this extent, please subscribe, like and share to your friends, and also comment on the comment section. So now the next thing we're going to do is to go over to our down part. I subtracted my 16.5, that is my half length, from that part. I'm going to mark my full length. My full length is 36. I went ahead and added 3 inches for my hem allowance. Waist to my hips is 8 inches, but I went ahead and added 8.5 for my allowance. So the next thing I did was to input my hip measurement divided by 4. plus 2.5 for my seam allowance. So I went over to the waist and also input my waist measurement plus 1 inch for my dart intake and also 2.5 for my seam allowance. So I went over to my normal full length, that is the 36. I placed my hip measurement, that is 9.5, and then from that part I am going to come in by 1 inch because I want my gown to be a little bit fitted. So I went ahead and added my 2.5 inch allowance. So now I connected it all the way to my point and I came down as well. So now to the back part, I left my 1.5 for my zipper allowance and then I trimmed it all the way like I did in the front. So now we are going to place wrong side facing wrong side, both your back and the front, to cut your asymmetric neck. I came down by 4 inch, although I left half inch above for my seam allowance. So my neck depth to be 3 inches. So I'm going to connect it like so all the way. You can choose your neck to be slanty or curvy depending on how you want yours to be. So the next thing I'm going to do is to come down for that part. I'm going to mark half inch and I'm going to cut it off. You can choose to cut it when you are cutting your main fabric. So now the next thing I'm going to do is to come down at that my waistline. I'm going to come down by 3 inches. Then I'm going to go down. As you can see, I want my down part at that point to come down a little, at least 2 inches. So I'm going to mark like that, 2 inches. So it's going to be 6 inches altogether. So I'm going to connect it from that point to that part on my waistline, on my waist side. That is 3 inches below my waist side. So the next thing I'm going to do is to measure the line that I am drawing, as you can see me doing. So I multiplied it by 4. That is length of 88, and then the width was 8 inches. So that when I'm done folding, it's going to come to 6 inches that I wanted. So as you can see, I've already gathered my cloth and I have added it to my line. So the next thing I'm going to do is to use my hem gum to attach that part all the way down, as you can see me doing. I did the same thing at the other side. So now I am done with the attachment. So see how beautiful and neat it came out. So over to our sleeve. So the next thing I did was bust divided by 12 plus 1.5. I got 3.6. I marked it like so. I marked my armhole, that is 7.6, and I connected it all the way like so. So the next thing to do is to get the midpoint. I marked it, and also I came up by half inch from that midpoint like so. So the next thing to do is to connect it like that. So this line I'm connecting will serve as our back armhole. So over to the front armhole, you come down like so, like as you can see me doing. I connected from that part and then I curved like so. That is it. I don't know if you understand, but don't worry, one day I'm going to drop a full video on how to cut the sleeve. So next thing I'm going to do is to mark my down part. I marked 6 inches. So I am going to connect it all the way, 6.5 actually, all the way up to that part. So now the next thing I'm going to do is to go over to get my second sleeve. One of the sleeve is going to be normal and the other one is going to be cut. So now I went over and I marked from that part. I'm going to mark I'm going to mark 3 inches, as you can see me doing. So from that part I am going to measure, okay, that part I'm going to measure 4.5 inches. So I'm going to come down by half inch and I'm going to slant it. So guys, please give this video a thumbs up and also comment if you have a question, so that a lot of people can see and also understand how to cut this beautiful gown. Thank you. See you in my next video. Bye.